Hi guys, it's Boater David Stone. I'm actually off the boat. I've gone for a walk and I'm just outside the village of Teddington, south of Leighton Buzzard. And I'm in the churchyard of St Giles Church, which is beautiful, very, very cut off. And I don't know what they're here, which is part of the reason for raising it, because I'm going to try an episode on consciousness, which I have serious misgivings about because I'm going to be trying to just work out what it is first before I start spouting off about um, my understanding of it. We've looked at what the problem is, right? It's about how can physical material matter give rise to qualia, a feeling of what it's like to be a sentient, subjective, aware human being. I came into the graveyard, and the first grave I saw was it looked really old. It looked actually belied its age. It was George Samuel Beardsley. If you ever get here, you might check it out. Who died in 2022. So I think that was the year my mum was born. So it's a while ago, 100 years plus. And I'm looking at the graveyard, and it's shambolic. I think there are a lot more older gravestones than new ones, and they're in such a state of bad disrepair. The stones that are relatively recent are sort of on their sides or leaning over. A lot of the old ones have fallen down completely. You can see the church is struggling to keep things together, even though the grass has been cut and it's not rained, I think, for a couple of months, so the grass is really dry. So this attempt at consciousness is just to try and set out why I think it's important in the sense of the things I don't think. And this is going to sound so arrogant. I don't mean it to, but it's just that when I look at all the work on consciousness that I've looked at over the years, and I've listed, sorry, there's a train going by. I don't know if my mic is picking it up, but never mind. It's a train out of Milton Keynes towards London, goes via Teddington. Um, you know, David Chalmers setting out 1994-95, the hard problem. The easy problem being, if you like, the correlations between neural and synaptic activity in the brain and stimuli. That's easy problem. Problems of light and perception are considered, in their dry mechanical sense, easy. What they mean and how we interpret perceptions are part of the qualia problem. Is my red your red, etc., etc. But the thing I've detected in and looking at Hammeroff and Penrose and Dan Dennett and Alex O'Connor and Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson and just umpteen others, John Searle, Colin McGrin, and even going back to looking at how the pre-Socratics, Socratics, and the enlightened thinkers looked at it, Bishop Berkeley, John Locke, David Hume. The one aspect of consciousness which I find missing or inadequately addressed is what I would just describe as its relational component. That's to say, it is awareness of, always in relation to something. And it seems to me that depending on what the relationship is, has a strong impact on how we understand the process of both the easy and the hard problem. Anyway, I could be just imagining this, but that's my take at the moment. But what I've got at the moment is my overly simplistic, unqualified attempt to pin down what it is. And doing that in a churchyard with some crows crowing, I just see a lady going to water some flowers of grave of a loved one, presumably, which is quite a long way off of my boat, seems appropriate because this is where we're all going to end up. And so this, if you like, the graveyard is the end of consciousness. It's the end of the journey. So I kind of like thought through the other day what kinds of levels of consciousness. I didn't want to call it actually levels of consciousness. I didn't even want to call it features of consciousness. I don't really have the right words for this, but I'm just going to make do at the moment with characteristics. And I discern 15. I'm just going to go through them, and this will be, if you like, consciousness part one, the introduction, and then I'll move on to the more challenging aspects later on. What I'm trying to do is imagine what consciousness was like for any of the bodies that are lying under the ground in this graveyard, and for anybody at any time, in any culture, anywhere, going back to the beginning of the formation of Homo sapiens sapien, even though we don't understand it and we can't put a chronology to it, the foundation of, there must have been, I assume, unless you're kind of like a theist or a panpsychist who believes that consciousness has always been there. I think there must have been a period in the evolution of the cosmos, the universe, in which there wasn't consciousness. I'm very prepared to be argued wrong. I'm not going to hold to that. It's just that's my instinct, intuition, if you will, intuition. I said before that the categories of reason that we want to draw on are deduction, induction, intuition, instinct, if you like, and abduction. So it's just a feeling I've got that consciousness was not there at the Big Bang. So we've got consciousness and what I would call fully attentive. I've said earlier that I think consciousness could almost be defined as that which attends to itself and to the world. Attends to attending, intentional, with purpose, with volition. Well, I'll come on to that much later on in a different section, but the volition part I think is critical. I don't think there was, part of the problem with free will, the free will argument, is it's all based upon, not all, most of it is based upon decision theory. And I don't think that's it at all. I don't think that even is worth talking about. What drove me to get off the boat, to go for a walk, to go through Horton on a public footpath, past a herd of cows, to end towards Cheddington, to go to the station first of all, and then end up at St Giles Church. You could only guess. You could go back to my childhood, you could go back to the English Civil War, you could go back to the Big Bang, you could look at biology, genealogy, genetics, whatever, and you could suppose that there were, on every point of that journey, even the point of picking up my walking stick, which I fashioned myself as a cane rather than a walking stick, there was an antecedent condition that led to that outcome, and it was going to happen. I don't believe that, but that's a persuasive argument of the, if you like, determinist school. So, what is consciousness like? Well, there's types of attentiveness or purpose or what you pay attention to. There's one type which I call fully attentive, and there's 4 categories. I'm getting all Aristotelian now, or Buddhist if you like, by looking for categories, but I'm completely making these up, right? I don't give them any credit. So there's fully attentive. Say when you're playing chess and you want to win, right? Everything else, how you feel, your health and well-being, whether you're hungry or not, what's the state of your relationship to the world, your relationship to other people, how well you are, how rich you are, whatever is going on. Everything is kind of like ignored as you focus with this precision like, almost obsessive attention to the moves of the pieces of the board. So there's that kind of, it's very, you might say as a subset of fully attentive, it is narrow. It's focused, highly attuned, but it's narrow. Then there's another form of fully attentiveness, which is when you're paying, as I am at the moment, attention to your surroundings, and you're looking at the flora and the fauna and the trees and the landscape, and you're paying attention to your breathing, possibly your state of mind, how you're feeling, what's your mood, what have you got to look forward to. You're kind of like, it's fully attentive, but more in the world. Then there's a third kind of fully attentiveness in which you're paying attention to somebody else or something else. You might be listening to a podcast, or you might be listening to someone talk, and they might be talking face to face in front of you, and you're trying to pay attention to every word that he or she says. Sometimes you do it through politeness, sometimes you do it through a genuine curiosity, sometimes because you are learning and you need to pay careful attention to what's being communicated in order for you to acquire the knowledge that you're seeking. And then there's a fourth kind of full attention, which is kind of like paradoxical, because it's an attention which comes from meditation, in which you stop attending to anything. So you actually attend to the non-attentiveness. And I do meditation from time to time, and the one that's most effective is the most difficult one. I know there's loads of different schools of this, and I'm not an adherent of most of them, and I don't really pay a lot of attention to all the nuances and differences between them. But the one where you train your mind to stop thinking, just turn the noise off, I find the most refreshing, most relaxing, and worthwhile. It's not neurolinguistics, it's not cognitive behavioral, it's not psychoanalytical. I don't think it's transcendental. It's kind of like verges on the transcendental a bit. It's not this swami or this guru or this whatever. It's just something I do from time to time. But that requires initially massive amounts of attention. So there's the four categories of attentiveness. Then there's four categories. I'm making it up, guys. Why not? Makes it sound clever, doesn't it? Four of this and four of that, and then four of something else. These are states of unconsciousness. So there's a subconscious, there's unconscious, there's sleep, and there's the state of your mind when you're seriously under the influence of hard drugs or alcohol. And in each of these situations, subconscious, unconscious, sleep, and under the influence, you don't have control of that. It happens to you. But I think, and as we go forward on this, I think that this state, not the being out of your skull state, but the subconscious, the unconscious, and the sleeping states in particular, are hugely undervalued in our judgment and assessments of the importance of consciousness. I've said elsewhere, I know it to be true for me, I don't know if it's true for you, but I solve a lot of my intractable problems when I sleep, or when I purposefully, deliberately avoid the subject. That experience of thinking of a name or title of a book or title of a song, and you just can't remember it, and you know it, and it's on the tip of your tongue. And sometimes the easiest ways of dealing with that is to pretend you're not interested and think about somebody else, and bang, it comes back in. So 4 forms of unconscious. Then there are what I would call 4 states of mind. These are where you might reflect on things like, are you depressed? Are you anxious? You're reflecting on yourself. This is what I mean by state of mind, is a period in the journey of consciousness, which is quite distinct, this reflectiveness. It carries with it, I think, for those of us who are minded to entertain the notion, quite powerful existential components, feelings of uh, dread around your own mortality, self-awareness about your health and your body and your mind as a living organism. This kind of state of mind is self-awareness about your personhood, your mammal-like nature, um, and also the state of mind. Just to round off with the fourth category, it's where we develop our personality, our personhood. There is another category which I'm not sure about, which is to do with psychology. I think that kind of like is the state of mind stuff. So I don't kind of like splice those together. Another facet or characteristic or aspect of consciousness is the one that I think is not enough attention has been paid to, which is the relational one. I mean the relationship we have to each other, to the world, to the environment, to our culture, to our history, to our society, to our, and it doesn't matter which society or which culture, which time. If you're born or were born in the 12th century in a village in Oxfordshire, you develop patterns of behaviour, relationships with others that will apply whether you're born in Battersea in 2026. It doesn't really matter. And the other categories, that's it's attentiveness, unconscious, state of mind or psychology, relational, that's 4. But then I'm going to blow it away by putting in a 5th. And that is activity or action. It's what you do, what we all do. And I think this is really important. I think also this is an understated part of the way consciousness should be considered. Not just as kind of like firing neurons in the brain or a kind of guess about how matter can become self-aware, but what it does, it's an adjective, not a noun. And the active part is really important because it say in the doing, you then have to reflect upon the doing of others. I currently, even though I'm knocking on a bit, I'm learning guitar. I do a lot of foraging. I started flower pressing of flora and fauna that can be eaten. Fruits, berries. The occasional animal will be going into the thing, but it'll only be small. I mean, there's a feast out there of bugs, I'm telling you, but I won't get into that now. The actions and activities that we do can end up becoming the thing that divides us from each other, which, if it's treated at the right level of abstraction rather than detail, it's absurd. But it is clear that for some people, the tribalism that tends to go into a football match, an activity, can spill out into a hatred for the other side, which I've seen it, I've witnessed it. Grown men foaming at the mouth at the prospect of the opposite fans coming into their stand. It's absurd. So there we have it. Attentiveness, 4 categories. The unconscious or subconscious, 4 categories. The psychology, state of the mind, at least 4 categories. And action, the will to act, the doing and the activity, the consequences of the activity, the thought processes that go in prior to it, during it and after it. The consequences of actions in your relationships with other people is also an important factor. So there you go. That's basically it. It's a quick introduction to aspects of consciousness that I think have to be set out there as part of what it is we're actually talking about before we get into the weeds of whether AI can have consciousness. To be fair, I don't think so, but I'll explain why. To account for, in my judgment, why our consciousness, Homo sapiens sapien consciousness, lends itself to expressions of freedom of the will, and why our consciousness also supports the arguments in favour of objective morality. And all of that, I think, starts to support when I get into parts 2, 3, 4, and 5 of this series on consciousness, should inform how we relate to each other and to the world, and have some bearing on how we think about things going forward. Later.